The collapse isn't coming. It's already here, not loud, not dramatic, but slow, quiet, and happening inside. You're holding it together, not for survival, but for appearance. You get up, you move, you smile when required, but every gesture costs more, and every silence echoes deeper. There's a war inside you that no one sees, a war between what you show and what you can't even name. Carl Jung once said, "You meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it." You've avoided the breakdown for so long, you've mistaken it for your enemy. But maybe, just maybe, collapse isn't a failure. It's a door. You've built a life around not falling apart, around being the one who can handle it, around being fine, even when you're bleeding beneath the smile. But let's ask the question you've avoided. What part of you needs to fall apart so the real you can finally rise? The ego clings to its routines, its defenses, its masks. It needs order, even if that order is killing the soul, and so you stay in structures built from fear, in stories you didn't write, in identities shaped by what others needed you to be. You call it strength, but strength that denies your truth isn't strength. It's self-abandonment. Nietzsche said, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." But you've mistaken stillness for safety, numbness for peace, survival for life. You are trying to keep a burning house standing, fixing windows as the walls char, painting smiles over smoke. But maybe you don't need to save the house. Maybe you need to walk through the fire, let it all collapse, and finally leave. There's a version of you screaming from beneath the ruins, a version that never needed to be perfect, never needed to be strong, just real. So I'll ask again, what part of you needs to fall apart so the real you can finally rise? Let's find out together. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from pretending too long, pretending to be okay, pretending to be in control, pretending that nothing inside you is crumbling while the world sees you functioning, performing, achieving. You've made survival a performance, a carefully curated illusion of balance, not because you're fine, but because you're terrified of what would happen if you finally stopped pretending. But here's the truth no one wants to say. The mask doesn't protect you, it isolates you, and worse, it costs you the parts of yourself that are most real. There's a version of you hidden beneath all that strength, a quieter version, one that doesn't know how to fake it, one that's been whispering in your sleep, in your anxious thoughts, in the tears that come for no reason at all. And still, you cling to the structure, the appearance, the illusion of holding it together. Because collapse isn't just frightening us, it's revealing. We don't fear falling, we fear being seen while we fall. You're afraid of what they'll think, of what you'll think, of what will be left when the scaffolding finally breaks. But that scaffolding, those expectations, those performances, those roles, they are not you. They never were. You're not weak for feeling like this. You're just tired of wearing someone else's face. And maybe the cost of holding it together isn't worth it anymore. Maybe it's time to fall. Not as failure, but as return, back to yourself, the one who never needed to be anything more than human. It wasn't madness, it was mourning, but you didn't know that at the time. You thought you were falling apart, when in truth, something inside you was finally asking to be felt. You've postponed 1,000 small funerals, the dreams you let go of quietly, the versions of yourself you had to abandon just to survive, the wounds you never allowed to bleed. And when it finally catches up, it doesn't look poetic. It looks like anxiety, numbness, that aching sense of something's wrong you can't explain, because no one taught you how to grieve what you never named. So your body holds the sorrow, your chest grows heavy, your mind disconnects, and every part of you screams silently for permission to stop pretending you're okay. But here's the brutal, liberating truth. Emotional collapse isn't dysfunction. It's your soul refusing to carry the ghosts any longer. The ghosts of identities you never chose, the pressure to stay invulnerable, the shame of not being healed fast enough, of not being who they needed you to be. And so you carry them. These invisible weights, these unfinished goodbyes, you carry them like strength until strength becomes your prison. Collapse doesn't mean you're broken. It means there's something in you still alive enough to weep, still whole enough to want to heal. And sometimes grief is the only language the soul has left when silence has been kept too long. So if you feel like breaking, maybe you're not breaking down. Maybe you're finally breaking open. You keep telling yourself you want to grow, to improve, to evolve. But beneath that desire is another truth, one that whispers when you're too tired to lie to yourself. You don't want a breakthrough. You want rest. You want the mask to slip without consequence. You want to collapse and still be loved, because even transformation has become another stage performance, another costume stitched by the ego. You chase healing like a trophy. You call it evolution, but it's still just you trying to earn your right to exist, and you're exhausted. Maybe the self-help books didn't help because they never spoke to the part of you that's not looking to rise, but to unravel. The truth is brutal, and it's this: you don't need another version of yourself. You don't need to be stronger, wiser, more enlightened. You need to be allowed to come undone, to cry without explaining, to stop pretending progress, to feel lost without immediately fixing it. Because the real self, the one hidden beneath layers of "I'm fine," doesn't need a breakthrough. It needs space to be broken, not forever, but honestly, without shame. And maybe the reason nothing has changed is because the one part of you that needs the most love is the one part you keep rejecting, the part that's tired, fractured, and no longer wants to pretend. This isn't weakness. This is the beginning of real strength, the kind that doesn't need an audience, just silence and truth. You've convinced yourself that control will save you, that if you just manage every detail, silence every flaw, perfect every part, then maybe, just maybe, you'll finally feel safe inside your own skin. But what if that need for control is the very thing strangling you? What if the leash you're gripping so tightly, the one you thought was protecting you, is wrapped around your own throat? You micromanage your emotions, you curate your image, you filter your pain into digestible pieces, not because you're vain, but because somewhere deep inside, you're terrified of being seen in your chaos. Because control gives the illusion of identity, but it's not identity, it's armor. And armor doesn't just protect, it isolates. The persona you've built, the one that seems responsible, composed, untouchable, isn't you. It's a survival strategy, a mask shaped by wounds. And the longer you wear it, the more you forget the face beneath. Carl Jung knew this. He said that the self cannot emerge until the persona fractures, until the mask slips, until the structure you've clung to as identity begins to fall apart. But falling apart isn't failure. It's the beginning of something true. The truth is, control was never your cure. It was your way of postponing pain, of avoiding the surrender that healing actually demands. And maybe now, maybe finally, you're ready to drop the leash, to let the illusion of control dissolve, not into chaos, but into something softer, something more real. Not control, but presence. It's not the silence you fear, it's what the silence reveals. You fill your days with motion, with noise, with obligation, as if stillness were some kind of threat, as if rest might expose something unmanageable. But there's no monster in the void, just you, the parts of you you've avoided, the thoughts that whisper when the distractions fade. Because when the calendar clears, when the phone is off, when the music stops, you're left with something most people never face: yourself. And that's the real terror, the version of you behind the roles, the one that doesn't know what to say, what to be, how to act without a script, the one that carries old grief like a scar beneath the skin, the one that was never invited to speak, only to perform. So you keep busy, not for success, not even for meaning, but for distance, distance from the echo inside. But busyness is a prison disguised as purpose. And the truth is, You're not afraid of emptiness. You're afraid of intimacy with yourself, because the void doesn't lie. It doesn't entertain. It just reflects every unfinished mourning, every secret fear, every piece of self-abandonment. But here's the shift. What if the void isn't punishment? What if the silence is sacred, a space not of absence, but of return? Not to the version of you that performs, but to the one who waits, behind all the noise, to be heard, maybe for the first time. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. There comes a moment when the body begins to betray the lies the mind agreed to, the headaches, the fatigue, the disconnection. You tell yourself it's stress, you tell others it's just a phase, but deep down, something else is happening, something ancient, something sacred. The collapse isn't dysfunction, it's communication. It's the soul, starved of truth, finally screaming through the skin. The exhaustion that won't lift, the numbness that no longer waits for night. The dissociation that turns your life into a movie you're barely in. This isn't weakness, this is protest. Because for years, you silenced the part of you that knew that something was wrong, that something was dying, not outside, but within. And now, your soul won't stay quiet. Burnout is not a badge of effort. Depression is not a flaw. Dissociation is not failure. These are signals, symbols, final warnings from a part of you that still hopes for rescue. You've been a mountain, steady, reliable, but inside you're volcanic, and the pressure has reached its limit. You can't keep pretending stability when your foundation is shaking. So maybe, just maybe, collapse isn't the end. Maybe it's the soul's most honest act, the refusal to live in denial, the last cry of something sacred, asking to be seen before it turns to ash. You look fine, you wake up, you work, you reply to messages, you smile when expected, you function. And that's the problem. Because functioning has become your disguise. It's what you point to when someone asks how you are. I'm okay, you say. And no one looks deeper. No one sees the fracture lines beneath the surface. Not even you, sometimes. But deep down, you know. You know that the version of you that's doing fine is also the version quietly unraveling. Because existing is not the same as living, and performance is not the same as peace. The world rewards the mask. It praises your resilience, your productivity, your ability to endure. But it never asks what it's costing you to keep showing up like this. And the cost is everything. It's the silence in your chest when the day ends, the fatigue that no amount of sleep touches, the sense that you're disappearing, not all at once but slowly, quietly, under the weight of pretending. Your smile, it's not joy, it's armor, stitched together with shame and survival. And somewhere along the way, you started calling this strength. But strength isn't suppression. Strength isn't functioning through inner death. Real strength is honesty. Not the kind you announce, but the kind that trembles, the kind that admits, I'm not okay and I don't want to pretend anymore. Functioning is not healing, it's camouflage, and maybe it's time to be seen, not as someone who has it all together, but as someone who's finally ready to stop disappearing behind the act. There's a version of you that was built in emergency, built out of fear, out of absence, out of survival. That version learned how to adapt, how to endure, how to smile through pain, how to stay silent when the soul was screaming. It did what it had to do, and it kept you alive. But now, it's killing you, because survival isn't the same as living, and the identity shaped by trauma can't carry you into healing. It wasn't meant to. You've outgrown the self you're still protecting, but letting it die feels like betrayal. Because that self was loyal. It got you here. It held the weight when no one else did. So you hesitate. You stall. You light small fires, hoping there'll be enough. But they never are. Because some transformations don't ask for editing. They demand ashes. And maybe that's the hardest truth to accept. The real you, the one buried beneath all that survival, Can't rise until the old self burns, not in hatred, not in violence, but in reverence. Write the letter, say goodbye, burn the myth of who you had to be, and watch what remains. Because sometimes collapse isn't destruction, it's liberation in disguise. The soul doesn't bloom in perfection, it blooms in ruin, it blooms in the silence after fire. In the ground still warm from death, ashes aren't endings, they're soil, and what grows from here will finally be yours. There's a difference between breaking down and breaking free. But when you've spent your life performing strength, collapse feels like failure, like shame, like something to hide. You forget that collapse can be sacred, because what you repress doesn't disappear. It grows heavier, darker, until it forces its way into your body, your thoughts, your sleep, until it breaks the mask that no longer fits your face. Carl Jung said, "What you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate." And maybe that's what's happening now. Not destiny punishing you, but truth, insisting on being felt. You're not falling apart because you're weak. You're falling apart because you've outlived the lie that says you have to be okay all the time. That healing has to look graceful, that you're only worthy when you're functional. No, you're worthy in your ruin, in your silence, in your raw, unfinished state. You don't need to be strong right now. You need to be honest. Because when you finally let the collapse happen, when you stop resisting the fall, something unexpected happens. You begin to hear the part of you that's been buried, the voice beneath the survival, the self beneath the story. And it doesn't speak in goals or affirmations. It speaks in presence, in breath, in the stillness after everything has crumbled. Viktor Frankl said, "Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, not a reason, not a reward, but a meaning." And maybe this is it. The collapse isn't where your story ends, it's where the lie ends. And in its place, something ancient returns, something soft, real, rooted. Because the soul doesn't bloom under pressure. It blooms after surrender. And you, yes, even now, are still becoming. You're not weak for falling. You are just closer to who you really are. And yes, there is still time to rise, without pretending anymore.